Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hello, everyone. I am so grateful to be here, and thank you, Gertrude. I am Ann Poirier, and I am based in Old Orchard Beach, Maine, by the coast. It's a beautiful area, and I am 58 years old. And so I am going to share a little bit about my story, my past, the way that I grew up, basically right from being born to now has really led me to my purpose and what I'm doing now. Over 40 years, close to 50, it was only when I turned a little over 50 that things started to change for me. So I stayed in the exact same loop for close to 40 plus years. My story really starts early. So I was adopted about 4 months old, and my birth mother was 16. And I just think about how hard life must have been being pregnant at 16 in the 60s. So it must have been a really rough time. So I greatly appreciate, and with all the work that I've done on myself, I greatly appreciate her giving birth to me and allowing me to live this life. And so my life started more like, that 4 to 5 months old, which I don't remember anyways. But my dad would always call me a chubby little baby. To this day, he calls me a chubby little baby when he looks at pictures. I was this chubby little butterball, and I was passed around. When they got me, they passed me around at parties, and that was the nickname. And it resonated with me more and more, only because as I got older, of course, I don't remember when I was a baby, but as I got older, the stories they would tell, and that my parents would be in a small group having cocktails, and they would be talking about, the day that Anne came home, and how they passed me around, and we're talking about how chubby and cute and pinching my thighs and all of those kind of things. So I heard that. So that was kind of internalized in my brain. And I wasn't really keen on the chubby word as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, because I didn't really fit into the same clothes that the other kids did. I looked different. I had really short hair. The other girls in my class had long hair. I just looked different, and I acted different. I really wanted to get outside and play. I was running all the time. I was hitting things. I was very kind of clumsy. My mother was always saying, watch what you're doing, be careful, slow down, go outside if you want to run, that kind of thing. So I started to have this conversation inside myself. I internalized all of these words and phrases that were talked about in my home, and I internalized them as I am clumsy, I am fat. The fat word really came from this chubby, and my parents commenting, right, on people's body sizes. And I think that was just the time, in the early 70s, when people of all sizes were still around, but there was a stigma around people in larger bodies. And so I interpreted all of that. My brother had a nickname for me, and I'll never forget. I ran around the house and I went to the backyard. I wanted to play football with them. I'm about 10 years old, and there's 6 of them, and they started to call me Annie Fanny Farmer. It was a little nickname that they gave me, and they sang it. So Annie Fanny Farmer, like I remember it. It brings up kind of a little emotional hit for me when I think about it. And I interpreted that as fat. Like all I heard was Fat Fanny from that nickname. And they called me that nickname for a couple of years, but that nickname sunk in, and the nickname I thought it meant was that I have a fat fanny, that I'm wrong. In that same time frame, I go to the doctor, and at the doctor's office, they weigh me, and the doctor pulls my mom aside and said, "You better watch what she eats." So all of a sudden, food is different at home for me. I can't fit into the same clothes as my friends. I'm now going into junior high school. I don't feel good in my body. I have gym class that I have to now change in front of other kids. I have to put on a gym suit. I don't look like the other kids. And I just internalize this self-hatred, self-loathing. My body's not right. I have to do something. And in that period, I was 11 years old, 11 to 12. I was right in that age range, and I went on my first diet. I just started really playing with my food, limiting what I ate, eating very little. Arguments started to ensue in the household. Why don't you just eat? I just kind of started to disappear in front of my family and in front of my friends. I just wasn't eating. I was doing sit-ups in my room. I was compulsive about trying to lose weight. It just consumed me. I didn't even really think about anything else. My brain was always on food, always on moving, always on what it looked like, always on a scale, stepping on the scale multiple times a day. And as my mother, there was this one moment that she had me stripped down, must have been about 12, and stand in front of the mirror and say, "What do you see?" And I pinched my body. I remember it. I pinched my body and I said, "I see fat." Like that's what I saw. I felt disgusting. I felt embarrassed, humiliated to be standing there in front of my mother in my underwear. And she just was sad and scared and distraught. She didn't know what to do. She fought relentlessly to get me help. And she did. She got me to a psychologist that helped me enough, even though I ended up in the hospital for over a month during this period of time because I lost too much weight. But during that time, I did get well enough to get back into school to start continuing on kind of my journey. My obsession with my body and my weight transferred into sport because it was a way to continue to burn calories. I went to college for fitness so I could continue to make sure that my body stayed the way it should stay, that I would look the way I should look. And so for 30 years, I was in fitness and I was in the fitness field, continuing this story in my head around and around and around that I'm not good enough. I've got to watch what I eat. I've got to watch how I'm exercising. I have to watch everything to make sure that I am the perfect image, which I never was because I was always trying. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what weight I was. It didn't matter what I looked like. It was never good enough. So I was always trying to change the way I looked. I kind of had a little bit of a relapse in college. And then, after I had children, being pregnant was the best time of my life in a way because it was this freedom. Like I knew that it was okay to eat because I was feeding another human. And as I think back on that, I think about how sad that was, that was such a freedom space for 9 months. And as soon as the 9 months were over, I was right back into beating myself up and this following this exact same pattern. So this just stayed with me. It hung with me, continuing to exercise, count calories, watch what I ate, and also on the flip side, binge on the other end because I wasn't getting enough food and I was sad and depressed and didn't like who I was. And so I would binge as well. So it just was a horrific kind of period of time. And in 2010, the marriage had been kind of over for a couple of years. And I decided to leave the marriage. And in that process, I fell completely back into eating disorder behavior. I was running all the time. I was eating, but also drinking, drinking probably more than I was eating. So I was medicating. I feel like I was medicating on all cylinders. And that just continued to demoralize my self-worth and my self-esteem. And so it really wasn't until my body started to break down that's when I started to stop a little bit. I was journaling a lot. The journal, I was saying the same things over and over and over again. I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do in my body. My body was broken. My knee was not working anymore. And I ended up going to the hospital. I had some surgeries already. I'd going into the hospital to get a part of my knee broken or my leg broken in order to continue to pound. They were going to line it up. And the doctor, right before wheeling me into surgery, says, if we get in there and your knee's too bad, we're not going to be able to do the surgery. And the minute he said that, my eyes started to water. I knew. I didn't know what I was going to do because he just pulled away my whole future. He pulled away my identity. I had no idea where I was going to go and what I was going to do. And it was in that moment and in the period of time after that, because of course I couldn't get the surgery, that I really did some soul searching and I dove into self-help and I said, there's got to be a different way, a better way. This can't be the way that I live my life for the rest of my life. And that's when I started to shift my own perspective about myself by doing the work. I went back to a counselor. I went back to school for eating disorders to learn more. I learned so much in my courses that I wish I had learned years and years and years prior. And of course, that just got me angrier and more frustrated and more on this kind of warpath of why don't our younger kids know that these things don't work and that bodies are different, and how can we start to teach them that now before it's too late? So with all of that, I ended up writing my story in my book, The Body Joyful, My Journey from Self-Loathing to Self-Acceptance. Through a lot of my journaling passages, it was completely healing for me. I really was able to step back from my whole life and look at it from a completely different perspective and say, well, no wonder I thought that, or no wonder I did that. No wonder I chose that. No wonder that I had the thought patterns that I did, because I could see the dots connected along my whole story, that of course this was going to be the way that I lived my life and thought I was not right or not enough or not good enough, because I pulled it into my body. I blamed my body for everything that was wrong, so instead of not being good enough, I just wasn't strong enough or fit enough or thin enough, right? So that was where all of my thoughts went. And with my own self-help journey, going back to school, learning about that, connecting, I connected with a man that I actually knew from college, and we ended up getting married, but there's a completely different relationship because my body and food and exercise, those are mine. And that was said from day one. And I think it's really important to be honest with yourself and make sure that you're the only one that can change your life and the direction of your life and the way that you're thinking and living and experiencing your life. We have people around us that want to change us or see us in a different light, and how do we take responsibility for our own actions, our own choices, our own decisions, and think about how we can see ourselves differently so we can live a life that we want to live. Now, with feeling good enough in my body, I am able to step forward and just have more joy and be happier, and also experience sadness and love and the other pieces that, grief, that are hard. But this body experiences it all. And I'm so grateful to have shifted my own perspective on who I am. And that's kind of the story of me really turning around from one way of thinking to a completely different way of thinking.
Wow. And your story is more common than it is uncommon. This is a story that repeats in almost every woman's life. At some point, we look at ourselves and we are our own worst critics.
Mm.
We say things to ourselves in our heads that you would never say to your best friend. And what I love is you took responsibility. You realized that the buck stopped with you.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is another woman right now who's listening to this podcast, is going through a similar struggle, can't see the wood from the trees. Based on what life has taught you, what 3 nuggets of wisdom would you give her right now?
Oh, such a great question. I think the biggest thing is that our bodies are all going to be different. They're designed to be different. We're supposed to be different sizes and shapes and colors, right? And we're supposed to show up differently. That's what makes this world unique and wonderful. And so, thinking about the fact that everybody has a different, and I come back to kind of the facts a little bit, that we all have a different gene pool. We all grew up in different environments. We all have different experiences. And all of those things play into how we perceive ourselves, how we assume others perceive us. And so, how can we pause and step back and say, how can I look at my body differently? If I've been looking at my body with self-hatred, or picking at myself, or always trying to change my body, how is that working for me? And if it's not working for me, how can I step back and start to see a different perspective of my body? And that, I think, is one of the biggest nuggets, is how can I see my body differently and start to look at it from the amazing things that it does for me every single day. So it's that kind of, how can I be grateful for the body that I have rather than hate the body that I have? So that's one. And then I also think, on top of that, you brought up a really great point, taking responsibility. I really, my own thoughts, and I pulled out my thoughts. I have a mini me and I have a maxi me. So I have these negative voices that I call my mini me, that are the ones that you were talking about, the ones that never, they never shut up. They just keep going and going and going, picking on you. And they repeat the same words over and over and over and over again. And they create these pathways in your brain. And so by pulling it kind of out and saying, oh, that's my mini me. Oh, thanks for sharing that, but that's not working for me anymore. And starting to strengthen a more compassionate, a kinder, a gentler, a stronger, a more positive, a more grateful, a lot of words there, maxi me, that I could start to counteract the mini me voices. So the second piece is, how can we actually start to dissect our voices a little bit? And how is this voice helping me? And how is it harming me? And how is it really working for me? So one is that our bodies are different. Two is that our thoughts Can we start to see our thoughts a little differently and taking responsibility for our thoughts? And the third is we have choices. We have a choice with how we respond to other people. We have a choice to what we say to ourselves when we look in the mirror. We have a choice to the decisions that we make, the behaviors that we adopt. We have choices. And sometimes I think we forget the only choices we have are with us. We can't choose for other people what we think they should do or shouldn't do or should think or shouldn't think, but we can certainly choose for ourselves. So those would be three pieces of wisdom.
I love that. Now, in the world right now with social media, young girls are struggling with their own self image. When we grew up, it wasn't so bad. Now they're looking at magazines, they're looking at Instagram, at photoshopped images of women who look perfect.
Mhm.
What can we do as mothers, as grandmothers, to support the younger generation to embrace the different shapes, the different sizes that we are born to be?
Mm. Another great question because we weren't designed to look at a on Zoom all day either. And I think with the pandemic over the past couple of years, our young people are looking at themselves all day long and then they're scrolling on their phones. I think there's a couple of different pieces of that. One is how can we as parents and as grown-ups in children's lives, whether we're coaches or teachers or doctors who work with children or are around children, how can we become the role models for them and embrace our own bodies and see food as just food and exercise as just joyful movement and really start to shape our own perspectives around all of this. I think about how can we change the conversation because kids will show up with their parents at uh, to go out to lunch, and the moms might be talking about the new diet or the new exercise program, and how can they be aware of the things that they're sharing with their children without even noticing that they are. So how can we as the role models shift our own perspectives and our own behaviors and our own language around all of this? And then when it comes to social media, can we start to filter in body diversity? Because we do see it a little bit more now. And are we able to control all the images? Dove has a great new video out around exactly what you're talking about that really shows how images are touched up and shifted and changed, and how can we educate our young people that this isn't the way that everyone looks, and show them more so they see more body diversity, because that's what we need in this world is more body diversity. And can we start to continue to make that flood some of these magazines? We see it, we're seeing it a little bit, but it's only 2-3%. How can we bump up that percent so that the percent of bodies that are all different sizes and shapes and weights and abilities can be shown so that our children realize that all bodies are different?
I absolutely love that. Now, you said something else that's really important about appreciating what our bodies actually do for us. So, I went through a very traumatic separation, a divorce. I lost a 31-year relationship, and my life was shattered. I was depressed. I was on antidepressants. I put on a lot of weight, and I ended up collapsing with congestive heart failure due to hypertension and stress.
Mm.
Now, this is 5 years ago, 2017. I'm still not 100% because I have the chronic fatigue, I have the anxiety. Now I am very emotionally sensitive to everything. My blood pressure goes up if I'm happy, it goes up if I'm sad. And I got to a point where I fully appreciate my heart now. My road to recovery has been a process of waking up in the morning and thinking it's pumping oxygen and blood and nutrients into every single cell of my body. I don't even think about doing it, it just does it for me.
Mm.
And I think that's a different way to look at our bodies, especially when we're healthy and you have no illnesses. Looking at other people who are struggling to get their health under control. I think if we could teach that at an early age, an appreciation of self at that level, it could
Mm.
also help a lot of young women, young men as well, to appreciate how the human body actually works and how we take it for granted. That was my
Oh,
biggest wake-up call.
for sure. And I think that there's also this really great way of seeing our senses. What can we see? What can we smell? What can we hear? What can we taste? And it allows for so much gratitude. And what you're saying about your heart, there are so many things that our body does just because it does it, and we don't even think about it. Right? Mm,
Yeah, it's amazing. So let
yeah.
me take you into the future.
Mm,
And we're going to have a little thought experiment. You're now 120 years old. With science and technology, we'll probably live way beyond 100, right?
mhm.
And you are sitting in your rocking chair, surrounded by your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. And the present you teleports into the future to have a conversation with this amazing woman who's led you to that point. Based on how you are living your life right now, what would you say to this wise woman who's led you there?
Mm. I would actually ask her to share with me what her biggest takeaway is that she would want me to remember. What do you want me to remember as I continue to live this life so that I can learn from her wisdom, learn from what she's been through between now and then? So she's lived another 50 years. And what has she taken from those 50 years that she wants to share with me? And I want to make sure that she has taken the time to stop and to, as they say, smell the roses, but to be more present in the moment and to reevaluate your values from time to time because they change. And in 20 years, my values might be different around what's really important to me. And how can I continue to remember what's really important for me every year that goes by so that I can live the life in the I can live my life in the present rather than in the future or in the past, which are two places that I think we go a lot that builds a lot of stress, and take time in the present moment.
I love that. And you're so right. There is only this moment. They say that a lot of stress, a lot of depression is caused by people living in a past that they cannot change, things that have happened to them before, or living in a future that may or may not happen.
Mm.
And so we forget to be present and just live in the moment. So that's a really beautiful reminder.
Mm.
Now, is there anything I should have asked you and I didn't? How can people get hold of you? Are you helping support other people to change and shape their perspectives?
Yes, I have a wonderful woman-only community, and is on. It's a private community on Facebook that we are sharing a different conversation. It's a place where we're really encouraging and empowering each other and supporting each other, inspiring each other to be and feel more comfortable and confident in our bodies, regardless of what size they are. And that's called the Body Joyful Revolution. And if you think about it as a revolution, we're changing the conversation around bodies, and we're trying to create more role models that have body diversity and feel good in their bodies, regardless of what size and shape they are. And along with that, we hope that together we can reduce, the bullying and the body shaming and the weight stigma that's out there now, along with eating disorders. But by having a group or a community where you can share some of the struggles that you're having, or share some of the successes and some of the things that you are doing that are working for you, is a wonderful place to be. So that is the community. It's a private community on Facebook. Anybody can join. It's free, and we share all kinds of great stuff there around body diversity and being comfortable and confident in our own bodies. And that's one place. And then, of course, the book. And I always like to offer a free digital copy of the book for anybody who wants it, because if you don't have the means to get it, I am happy to share the book, because it lays out a different way of thinking, I think, for people.
I love it. Absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for coming online today and gracing us with your presence and bearing your soul and being vulnerable to share this beautiful story. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that there is another woman out there who has tuned in today, and through the sharing of your story is seeing a bit of light at the end of the tunnel for her. Mm-hmm. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in from all over the world. The Her Story movement is attracting some phenomenal women who have gone through their own personal struggles, but are using their stories to change the world, one woman at a time and one story at a time. So, Anne, thank you for honoring your story and sharing it with us today. Thank you. I'll be back again tomorrow with yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And bye for now. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep